Kirk Hilliard.
And this is Rusty Byrd. It's the Kirk and Byrd Show. We are joined today by Dave Fawcett of the InsideNOVA Sports section. Dave does a great job covering local high school sports, representing Prince William County, Stafford, and Northern Virginia all together. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. No worries.
Go ahead, Kirk.
No, I was just going to say, Dave's got a little bit of latency, so we're going to concentrate on the richness of the subject matter. Don't worry about the video, which y'all don't want to see us anyway. But yeah, what we're going to do in this segment, and I'll let Rusty take back over the MC role, is we're going to talk in depth about the Class 6 Freedom-Woodbridge game, as well as James Madison from Vienna. This time, we're releasing a video where we talked a lot about Freedom. So David is going to give us a lot of insight on to Madison. So you Madison folks, we want you to subscribe. Everybody else, please subscribe. And then Rusty, why don't you take over? We want to make sure David gives everybody the information on InsideNOVA and all the places that we can reach him. So Dave, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, where everybody can find your information, and then we'll get started on just talking about the exciting game on Saturday, just 4 days away.
Sure. David Fawcett. I'm the sports editor for InsideNOVA. I primarily just cover Prince William County. I've been doing this for 30 years now, at least. And so we're primarily online, obviously, at InsideNOVA.com. We also do a weekly newspaper that comes out on Fridays, InsideNOVA / Prince William. But the daily newspaper is essentially online, as I said, at InsideNOVA.com. So that is the main source. So come Saturday from the game down there at ODU, that'll be the main place for photos and game results and all that kind of stuff. We'll be down there. So.
And you're on, David, you're on Twitter also, because we know a lot of student athletes like Twitter. What's your Twitter handle? Is it at InsideNOVA?
Well, I'm going to show my age here a little bit now. We'll be on. Yes, I don't have one personally because I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but the main handle is at InsideNOVA is our Twitter handle. So that's the one everything goes through. Is that one? Yes.
Yeah. You know what? I feel you, Dave. I'm the same way. Like, we have a Twitter account, and we have a Facebook page. It's from what I understand with the kids, the older kids. I mean, the old people still use Facebook. The kids use Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. We use Twitter, but I'm not as comfortable with it, and I'm just far, So I feel you, bro. I feel you. All right. So look. I saw you on Saturday at the Western Branch Freedom game, and so I like to get some of your thoughts on the game. Just a little background. Kirk and I are from Hampton, Virginia. I played football, ran track at Bethel. He went to Phoebus, who's in the Class 3 state championship. But we live up here now in the 703. So we have a lot of pride in teams from that area. One of the things that the reason we're so sports crazy is because everybody down there is sports crazy. We don't have a professional team, and we don't even have a major college team like Power 5, like Maryland in the area or UVA. A lot of us love Virginia Tech and UVA, but so high school sports is huge for us, and so the people down there, we take a lot of pride, and actually we come from schools that were very, very good in sports. So it's a lot of chatter down there, and a lot of people down there don't think anybody else outside of 757 can play sports. Yeah. But I've been trying to tell them boys down there, man, we got some football players up here too. So Tell us, let's talk about that Western Branch Freedom game on Saturday. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think kind of just taking your cue on that, I think the big question was, okay, obviously Freedom has rolled this season pretty much over everyone, but now they're facing a team from the Tidewater area. Yeah. Could this be a different? Now, Freedom still could win, but are they going to be as dominant? And I think that was a fair question. I certainly thought that. I was, because again, as you mentioned, the tradition down there, You know, if you get to this level, regardless, you must be doing something right. So I think that was going through a lot of people's head. Would this be the team that, you know, would not necessarily maybe beat Freedom, but they would push them more than anyone else? And so, you know, that Freedom gets they start the game with the ball on that first play. Jeffrey Overton Jr. goes for 51 yards, and then they score a couple plays later. They get the ball back, they score again, and it was like, yeah. I mean, I know it's only, I think it was less than about 2 minutes into the game, but they're up 14-0. And even after Western Branch scored on their next drive to get within 7, you could just tell the way Freedom was playing that this was going to be another typical performance for them. And so I was, I'll be honest with you, I haven't covered a lot of their games this year, only because there wasn't a lot to cover there, only because of, you know, the lopsided results that typically follow them. And that's not the fault of anyone. It's just, you know, I got to, you know, limited resources and where best use your time. But they were, so I wasn't totally surprised, but I just, the fact that they were so poised, so prepared, and so focused. It was just, I remember I was talking to Tristan Evans afterward, and, you know, he's a pretty low key kid to begin with anyway, but yeah. He, you know, he sets the state record for most TD passes, all these different things. And it was just sort of, yeah, you know, but this was, as he said, it was sort of another day at the office. They played Freedom football. They were so, I was just not, I always say surprised, because I'm not, but that they were so dominant and they executed so well. But it was pretty clear from the start when they just did what they did, and the way they did, that it was going to be another long day for another opponent, even one from the Tidewater area, that they were just going to win, and they were going to win big. So
yeah. I've seen probably about 6 or 7 games this year, and I thought it might, like you, I mean, this is a team in Western Branch that beat the 2-time defending Class 6 champions in Oscar Smith. They played them twice. They lost the first game 2-0, you know, safety. So they held Oscar Smith scoreless, and then they beat them, you know, in the region. And so I thought, okay, because I saw that Oscar Smith team. I was like, okay, Western Branch might really have something. And then after, like you said, the first 2 touchdowns, and then, you know, you could tell Western Branch was like, we're going to slow it down. We're going to move the ball. They scored, and I think it was 14-7 or whatever. But next thing I know, they scored again. But I remember I was doing some live updates on Facebook and sending out a couple of tweets and texting just a group of personal friends. And I was like, bruh, I think Freedom has only had 10 plays and they've got 21 points. and then when you look at the totality of the game, I believe they had 10 possessions, 7 touchdowns, and 3 touchdowns called back.
Right. Yeah, correct. And it was almost a clinic. I think what they did, I mean, it was their execution was superb. And I would say on both sides of the ball, they were well prepared on what Western Branch was going to do. And I think more defense. I mean, offensively, I think they stuck to their game plan. They have what they have. You know, it's interesting. You know, anyone who knows head coach Daryl Overton's teams over the years, they're always known for prolific offenses. That's nothing different. You know, it's sort of one quarterback graduates, he replaces them with another, and they implement it, put them into the system, and they run it well. This year's team, though, and is explosive on a whole other level, that way beyond any of his previous teams, and probably any team that I would say has probably come out of, well, certainly out of the state now statistically, but and what they're doing and the way they're doing it is they have so many different options out there. When they went to the state championship in 2018, they really had one primary receiver in Omari Hatcher, who's now at Syracuse. Had some other guys around them, but he was the main guy. This year, Tristan Evans has 4 guys primarily he can go to, and if you look at the numbers, those guys the receivers are all close together in numbers. There's not one guy that he primarily looks to. He's got 4 guys, and then he's got Jeffrey Overton Jr. out of the backfield when he's not rushing for 100+ yards. He's a very good pass catcher, and that offensive line is experienced, and so their ability to just spread it around with a quarterback who really is that Darryl trusts, he's confident in, makes them just it's really a sight to see. I guess they've had good players, they've had good teams, but what they're able to do in the speed, it's just on a whole other level. So I think that's the biggest thing, and so they just overwhelm opponents. And Western Branch, I mean, you look at they threw 6 touchdown passes on Saturday, and it was 2 to Reed, 2 to Preston, 1 to Jeffrey Overton, and 1, I believe, to Cam Courtney. So they can do so many different things, and so it's a very it's impressive, but it's not surprising. And so that game was over fast. I mean, it was I think it was 49-7 at halftime, and that's anyway. So and I would say the defense probably gets overlooked a little bit just because the offense does so well. But the addition of TJ Bush to the team this year, he transferred in from Bishop Ireton. They had some good players coming back, but he's the difference maker there, because what he allows them to do up front, or what he does up front, allows other guys to do so many different things. And he is such a disruptor. You saw that early on. He finished, I think, with like 2 sacks, a bunch of tackles for loss. So they set the tone early. And Western Branch they were definitely overmatched, and Freedom, to their credit, just kept pounding. They don't let up. They keep coming at you, and they that's just what they do. So
yeah.
I think that that proves they're out of region. They got out of region, right? And the 757 litmus test, which I want to comment on. Rusty and I are in our 32nd year living up here. So we've lived up here longer than anywhere. 4 years in Blacksburg for me, 18 years. And I think the 757 luster has worn off, because these kids playing now. Ronald Curry was 25 years ago. That was his senior year. And the mystique is still there, but Northern Virginia has won quite a few state championships. So the kids at Freedom, as well as Madison, and by the way, Ronald Curry and that national championship team played Madison in the state championship. I believe it was in Hampton, but I think Coach Overton, they have a special team this year, and the fact that they really exclaimed, on Saturday, they beat a very good Western Branch team, that beat Manchester, Oscar Smith, a number of other teams, says something. But that segues into Madison. It seems like James Madison of Vienna, nobody's giving them a chance. I was just looking at their schedule. They've had a lot of close games, which I think bodes well for them. And what do we know collectively, the three of us, about the game being a very good undefeated Fairfax team for their 11th straight victory, and wasn't a thumping, but it was they led the whole time. David, what have you heard about that game? As far as correspondence, we're kind of limited on it, so we want to talk about that game with Freedom, and then moving forward in overview of both Madison as well as Freedom-Woodbridge. What did you think about the Fairfax game?
Or
hear about it.
I don't know a lot about those teams because I don't, primarily cover them. But I was, I think Madison was one of those teams. I remember, talking to some of the Prince William coaches before the season, gosh, in July now, talking about teams to keep an eye out for. And Madison definitely came up as a contender. So I don't know that it's a huge surprise that they got this far. I think it was probably a bigger surprise that they started the season off the way they did, losing. I mean, they lost. I think it was Stonebridge was one of those close opponents that they lost, one of those close outcomes. But I don't think it was. I think that was right. So I don't think it was as big a thing. I think they were always considered this caliber of team. But I think because of the slow start, you started to wonder, well, oh, maybe they were overrated, or maybe something more going on. But I don't think it's a huge surprise that they're here and in this position. I think they've been in the state maybe the state semifinals the last couple years. I mean, they're not foreign to this territory. They've been here before and they know. So I don't think it's as huge a thing. I think looking at the 3 losses and the way they started, may throw people off a little bit, but they're really, on paper, they were certainly a strong contender to be here in December.
Yeah. I mentioned on another episode that we see that record, but their first 3 losses were by a combined 7 points. And each of the teams that they lost to made the playoffs. And I believe all 3 of those teams won their district or were first or second. I know Stonebridge and Yorktown won their district or were very high. But this is the thing. Madison, they are very well coached. I mean, I saw them. I've seen them over the years. I talked about the fact that those kids come through that Vienna youth football program, and they run their stuff. They lost a lot of seniors last year, so that kind of explains maybe why they started also a little slowly. They lost over 20 seniors. I think this will be a decent challenge, but I don't think this will actually have been the toughest challenge for Freedom. Now, Madison can prove me wrong. All year I've been saying if anybody could play with Freedom, it would be Patriot. It would be Patriot, just because Patriot, I thought, they're from the county. They played these kids. I like the way Patriot is built. And Patriot did give them a game of sorts, but I think we gave some predictions, and I think that, like I said, for Western Branch, I think that they will win by at least 40. Don't know the final score. So I'll just leave it at that. Kirk, any other thoughts before we actually go into learning a little bit more about Dave Fawcett?
Yeah, I guess we could close out by saying it's pretty much a gone conclusion. Everybody's picking Freedom-Woodbridge. I don't know anybody that's picking Madison. So Coach Counts and the kids. I mean, this is great bulletin board material, and I would say that based on one question, and then let's transition. Let's make some predictions. I think all 3 of us are going to pick Freedom-Woodbridge. Maybe we'll go by margin, but one of the things that I wanted to point out for both sets of fans, if you want somewhere good to eat, there's a place called Fellini's in Norfolk. I think it's on Colley Avenue. Fellinis. Make a reservation as soon as you can. It's a great restaurant. So there you go, a little local, information. But
one thing I did want to do is, before we actually talk about Dave personally, Dave, I did want to get this perspective from you, and I forgot I meant to do this earlier. You've been associated with this county and covering sports for a number of years. Can you tell us how this compares to other great football teams from Prince William County? And we've had some that have won state championships. So, when you talk about the Hyltons, Battlefield won the last one, but Osborne had some great teams. Tell us a little bit about what you've seen over. How does this team compare?
Yeah, that is a great question. That's a really, really good question. Obviously, statistically, what Freedom has done offensively this year, I mean, no one comes close to that, obviously, in the county or even in the state now. But, those 2 Hylton teams, those back-to-back Hylton teams, one of which Darrell Overton was a member of when they won it in 1998, when they went back-to-back 14-0s. Boy, they were loaded. The Osborne team that won it went 14-0 in 2006 with Brandon Hogan, who of course went on to play in West Virginia in the NFL. He was their quarterback.
Yeah,
he's probably, in my opinion,
great.
One of the best all-around athletes best football players I ever seen. He was a kid that he could do everything, and you put the ball in his hands, and he was kind of that one-man wrecking crew because he could do so much. So. I don't know yet. I don't know that I would rank Freedom, as the best. I don't know. I don't know if it's as clear cut as it may seem, just based on the results that Freedom has had this year. Because I think there's obviously in the discussion, but those would be the rivals. I would think the two Hylton teams that went 14-0 and 14-0 when Ahmad Brooks was on those teams as well. And then that Osborne team with Brandon, because Battlefield, they had a nice run. They lost twice. They had an incredible run in the postseason. Really good coaching staff. Upset everyone along the way. They were the underdog. You had even a small school like Manassas Park won it with Zach Terrell. They went 14-0. But I don't know. I'd put them in the same group as a Freedom point. But those two Hylton teams are in the Osborne, I think they were really good. That'd be a heck of a matchup. To see those two teams and see those matchups.
Yeah. Let me ask you this also, Dave. When we talk about, TJ Bush is a great player. He played with my son at Bishop Ireton last year, and I hadn't seen this side of him until he got to Freedom. And great kid, great athlete. Clearly, Jeffrey Overton, Tristan Evans, they're really, really good players. But over the years, I've been living in this county for 20 years, and I've followed high school sports, for the last 40. I referee high school basketball. I've coached youth, middle school. Who would you say is is the most impressive, or may not be the best, or it may not have had the best post high school career, but who's the best athlete you've seen come through Prince William County?
Oh man, that's a lot of woo.
Well, I'll just say for football, I would say for me, it would be I'd have to be a tie, because Ahmad Brooks, aside from what he did, he in college and obviously played in the NFL, what he did at Hylton, as good a linebacker as he was the National Defensive Player of the Year his senior year. As a running back, he had over 1,000 yards, and what he was able to do, he was a physical freak. But I'd also say Brandon Hogan. Again, I'll just go back to him. Yeah. He was, again, just one. For me, he was one. I remember when Osborne won the state championship and they beat Chantilly, and he had a hand in every touchdown. Every time he touched the ball, he just made a difference. Now, they had good guys around him, obviously, but there's no way they're even in that position without him, because he could make such a difference from that position. And aside from what he did, obviously he went on to college and the NFL, but he was otherworldly to watch, and just how he was able to take control of a game. And you're thinking, well, it's one kid, one position. How is it that much of an impact? But he could just do those types of things that would make enough of a difference at that level to put you in a position to win. So I think those two guys, again, aside from what they did in college and even making the NFL, just on the high school field. Now, there are other kids who were really big difference makers who didn't. I think Bobo Bethard, who was Bobby Bethard's grandson, played at Battlefield. He was on their state championship team. He was a kid. Now, he's a small kid. I think he played at Appalachian State. But he was one of those kids who wasn't a big name necessarily, but he would always come up with the big plays and could do so many, that versatility. So, he's right up there too. But I think Hogan and Brooks, for me, were just they were special talents and types of players you just don't see, come out. You just don't see every day, and so they were able to maximize it at that level, and then obviously go higher. So I totally agree. I saw those athletes as well, and what I give them is that they were not just great, but they won state championships, and to me that adds to the lure. The other two or three I add to that is more recent athletes, and that's because I also had a personal relationship with one. Deshaun Hand was clearly an outstanding high school football player, national player of the year, and then Ricky Slade. Ricky Slade had a tremendous high school career around here, and some people may not remember Antoine Williams, the Rocket at Woodbridge. He led them to the state finals against Westfield back in the day. So those are some of the athletes.
and football players that stand out to me. But I totally agree. I think like those are like our Mount Rushmore of athletes in the last 30 years, because you can go back to Russell from Woodbridge, Russell Davis, and so they played my yep.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, that's some of the things of talent we have here in Prince William County. We're going to post this on Prince William website, but we'll also share this down in Hampton Roads. I think the next question the next thing we wanted to do was just actually, I wanted to profile you, Dave. Tell us, Dave, you've been at InsideNOVA or reporting on Prince William County for over 30 years, but tell us how you got started. Did you grow up in this area? Where did you go to school? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. My family's originally from upstate New York, Binghamton area, kind of the southern tier. So grew up there. That's where all my roots are. And then my family moved down to Warrenton, Virginia. I think when I was in 6th grade. I really wasn't, I'd done some sports up in Binghamton, youth baseball, things like that. I ended up going out to a small private school in Rappahannock County called Wakefield. That's where I went through high school. Very small school, very little school. So, I mean, we had soccer was the sport there. So that's why I learned to do soccer there. And that kind of became, if you wanted to do sports, it was soccer. We had no gym. There's certainly no football team with the numbers. So there was no real basketball. So I had always kind of been a sports fan when I was growing up in New York. There was, at that time, you didn't have the Bills were 3 hours away, the Giants, the Jets 3 hours away. So I was actually a Miami Dolphins fan. I when that was their, their undefeated season and all that, and Zonka and Greasy, all those guys. So that's kind of how I got introduced to that. And then, became more of a fan. I never really aspired to write about sports. Some people do. It was not really my thing. I just enjoyed following it. And once I came down here to Northern Virginia, following the Redskins, now the Commanders and things like that. So, I was interested, in that stuff. I did a little bit of writing on the side for the student newspaper, but it wasn't a big, I just didn't grow up in an area where, high school sports were just such a big deal. Certainly not at my school, and then just in general, it just wasn't something I understood. And then I went to, I graduated from Syracuse University, which has a really good journalism program there. Yes. And that's where, so I got my degree there. I had to, I always have this memory of my mother saying, David, it's your junior year. You got to declare something here. And it's like, I guess I'll pick sports journal or just print journalism, which that was a degree then. It's not now, of course, with everything digital, but then you had that degree. So that's what I did. Syracuse.
Can I ask you something, Dave? When you were there, is there anybody
Sure.
who would recognize any names that maybe went on to do more, to be TV personalities or even writers?
So many.
Mike Tirico was my year. So he's the biggest name. He was actually in a law and communications law class of mine. He showed up the first day, and I never saw him again. So that was my only encounter with Mike Tirico in person. But anyway, Mike was he was on a whole other track at that point. He was already destined for where he is today. So we were in totally different worlds. But I would say Mike was was certainly, even then, he was the big name then. So yeah, he was the guy.
and what teams were good at Syracuse at that time? Was it the basketball program?
The football team. My senior year, the football team went undefeated and went to the Sugar Bowl, and that's the famous Auburn game where who tied who. Auburn went for the field goal and tied Syracuse at the Sugar Bowl. So that was 87, and then that same year, the men's basketball team went to the championship game, lost on the final shot by Keith Smart, beat them from Indiana.
Wow.
In New Orleans.
Derek Coleman on that team?
Yeah, so it was a good time to be there.
Yep.
Yes, Derek Coleman was a freshman. Ronnie Cycli, Sherman Douglas.
I
yeah, a
love
bunch of those
that
guys. So,
team.
yeah, it was a good.
Yeah, that was Dom McPherson. Was the quarterback,
Yes.
I believe, on that team, and that was a
That's
great
correct.
year. That was a good year for Syracuse, that's for sure.
All right. So how did you
I worked. So I ended up, I graduated from Syracuse, wasn't really sure, what to do. I went to, I went to Florida at first for a girl. I went down to Florida after I graduated and for that. And then I eventually came back to Northern Virginia. And I wouldn't say the Syracuse degree opens up some doors. It's not necessarily my credentials and my experience, but the Syracuse degree can help. So I was able to get at that time was called the Potomac News, which was the daily newspaper, it covered Prince William County. It was based in Eastern Prince William. We were on Smoketown Road next to Garfield. And so I got an interview there. They wanted somebody who knew about soccer because soccer was growing in Prince William County. And I had a little bit of a background there. So was able to get the job there. And, back then, of course, that was the thing. The daily newspaper was 6 days a week, eventually 7.
I miss it.
We had a staff, but everything was primarily focused on high school sports, which for me was a new world. I wasn't, again, like I had said earlier, I didn't cover high school sports. I wasn't really familiar. And I walked into some stuff at Prince William where, wow, these people are really passionate. In some cases, maybe a little too passionate and a little too hyper involved. But anyway, it was a big rude awakening for me. Just a little over I just wasn't, I was like, wow, you guys really take this seriously. So I had a steep learning curve there to learn to, as far as maturing and handling myself professionally. But that's really where, and where it started. And I guess over the years, I had never really had a passion for, I covered stuff at Syracuse. I had the opportunity to go cover the men's basketball team and travel with them and do those types of things. But I never really had a desire to cover stuff on the professional or the college level full time. It just wasn't my thing. I felt it was just, I don't know that I had the killer instinct to really compete at that level. And you really need that. So I just became content with covering the high school stuff. I think there's, good stories are good stories, no matter where they're at. I don't get caught up in, just because someone's well known, they're, a bigger story, a better story than someone who isn't well known. So I think at the high school level, I found that, obviously the kids, excuse me, there's more accessibility there. You don't have to go through a lot of different hoops. You have to be a little more sensitive. You got to be more careful when you're dealing with high school kids. But I've found over the years that I really enjoy talking to them. In some ways I find them more adult, honestly, than some coaches or their parents or administrators. They're just, they're very mature. They're very articulate. They're very insightful. And they're at that stage. I've always enjoyed, covering people before they became big stars or even after they became stars, but not really during, because that just becomes a whole other animal. I'm just not really into having to deal with all the hassles with that. But I enjoy saying, I remember when I remember meeting Deshaun Hand as a freshman. I remember the first time I met him, and, a tremendous person, obviously a good football player, but even a better person. I can remember these kids. I was over at Freedom yesterday talking to Jeffrey Overton Jr. I'm like, I remember covering your dad and your uncle. That's how long I've been doing this. And so I kind of think that's an important niche. And I think it helps to fill in, before they sort of became big names, what was it like? And so I just enjoy that. I just think there's good stories there that go beyond necessarily tied to a sport or a school. It's just good human interest stuff. And I guess over the years, I just kind of became, oh my gosh, another year has passed, and I kind of became settled, and this sort of became my home. I had never done anything in Prince William County my entire life before I came to work here. And, so I had no familiarity with the high schools, no familiarity with anything. And then, but obviously now over the years, I'm a little more familiar with what they do. So,
So for those that are watching, I want you to know, like, Dave's been here for 30 years, and he went from that paper thing I used to be a paper boy.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. But I've always gotten, it was what was the Prince William, what was it called? The Prince William, not Times, the Prince William
Gazette?
The Potomac. No, what was it called when you first started?
Potomac?
The Potomac.
The Potomac News.
Potomac News. And I used to get that.
The Potomac News.
The Potomac News, yeah, and I loved it. And so what my point is this, and then I still would get the weekly paper that you guys put out. But my point is this: I need our subscribers to support Inside Nova and what Dave and that great group of people do. I was just talking to a good friend of mine, Darren Wright. We coached football together. His son is Nathaniel Wright, the big sophomore tackle for Forest Park. And we were just talking about Inside Nova, and we were saying, people just need to donate, even if you're not. I mean, it's free online access to great information. And so I just want our viewers to know you're getting it for free, but let's keep it there. Let's keep it, and we don't have to go through a paywall like some other places. So I'm putting, if Dave won't do it, I'm asking you, what would it hurt to give $100? If you 120, give them $120, $10 a month. That will go a long way for some great stuff. I'll put that plug in for you, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you.
Funny,
Yeah,
Rusty,
the industry has definitely changed. Once in a while, some people.
Go ahead. Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say just kind of what Rusty was saying. It's like, and once in a while, some people will ask me, do you ever think you'll ever see a daily newspaper in Prince William again? I said, I can guarantee you will never see that. It's just not financially viable for people. Everything is just going the way it's going. And that's just across the board. I mean, we've been done with layoffs. I've dealt with the closing of a paper, all those things. It's just the nature of the business now. But that being said, and I'm obviously biased with Inside Nova. We have a really good staff, and I think we are truly committed to local journalism and getting into those things that a local newspaper should be doing, whatever that is, whether it's whatever that field may be. But we have limited resources. I mean, people think I have a whole staff, and I do not. It's me, myself, and I. And so that's you get to what you can get to, but it's just not feasible. There's more schools, more kids, fewer me. So, you have the days of having multiple staff writers and all those types of things. That's just, a bygone era. But I think for the most part, people get that and they understand that, and they're willing to be, flexible on that and work with that. But it's a different, I still have to work my way out of that going, oh yeah, I've got to remember that I'm writing for online, really not really for a deadline paper. It is a different era for sure, but it's never going back to the way it was. That's for sure.
I was just going to say, Rusty, we were going to pipe in at the same time about the newspaper. Growing up our age, which is almost similar, it's like you lived off of that paper newspaper, the box scores for football and basketball. You figure out how guys were doing, and then information that you received was scoop. And that was what I was just thinking about Inside Nova. Is what I find is with being online is you need to give people information they're not getting anywhere. And the scoop, as far as, let's say a player announces for a transfer, you're going to hear about it on Twitter before you hear about it. I heard about the UVA shooting on Twitter at about 1:30 in the morning the night it happened. So I don't necessarily think you're going to get scoops, but when you know information, you could tell a story that no one else knows. I think that's what gets it. And that's, with Inside Nova, and what we're trying to do here is give people information that they don't already have. And, what I was going to point out for everybody, Inside Nova and our show, is we're converting to hoops basketball. So I'm putting out emails now to coaches. We're going to have some coaches on. And Prince William County, with Patriot, Battlefield, great basketball conference, wonderful teams, and as well as Fairfax County, great.
And Loudon.
Yes, and Loudon. Yeah, Loudon County, South Lakes, the defending state champion Hayfield. So yeah, we could get into a whole our young people now don't know what a paper newspaper is, but I really enjoyed that. Whenever I went up north, I'd go to a newsstand to get the Washington Post that was flown up there. So I mean that was a big thing. Yeah.
And this is the other thing about a paper. Right. I remember, like, no, look, kids are online. They get articles about them, and there's pictures of them. My son's got 1 million pictures in Inside Nova from track and football. But I remember the first time somebody said, "Rusty, you're on the front page of the paper," and I was like, "What?" And it was the Hampton Bethel game. We had played the game, and that was a big rivalry. And I was like, "What?" So I left school, drove to 7-Eleven, and bought about 10 copies. And I felt that paper in my hand, and I still have copies of it. And and just like at Bethel back in the day, when any article about the athletes or school, they would put it on a wall. And I just remember the product. Look, I made the paper, but yeah, so that is good. You appreciate the work you're doing. Dave, we're gonna do our last segment where we want to know a little bit more about you outside of Dave, the sports guy. So we this is something I've done in interviewing people for years. Like, once we're getting done with how much do you know about budgeting in the federal government, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, what takes you home at night? Dave, so let our fans know, what is Dave like outside of reporting?
Well, it's funny. People think, and I get that. I would think the same thing, that I'm, off the clock. I spend my time watching sports, following sports, and things like that. And I really don't. I need to unplug from it. So I don't spend a lot of time watching games, and doing those types of things, because I really need a break from it. So I'm pretty active in my church and doing things there. I do, I have, a family. We have a dog. We do, a lot of outdoorsy stuff. So it's a lot more family stuff, and some of it's age. I'm getting up there. So things, start to slow down there a little bit. But yeah, so I would say those types of things, in general. I've found over the years that I'm spending a little more time with. I mean, I don't mind, the sports stuff I like doing when it's work related, and hey, if somebody I know or someone local, I can cover those types of things. But beyond that sphere, I don't do much with it. And, I'm okay with that. So primarily, with family stuff, church stuff is kind of the things that gladly occupy my time now. So
do you watch some of the things on Netflix, or are you streaming anything, or do you have an all-time favorite movie or sports movie?
Well, we always ask that.
I don't, unfortunately, because I live in a very rural area, I'm not able to stream. So that is a limitation for us. But so I have to wait till things come out on a DVD or something and put them in the DVD, the player. But as far as, yeah, right, yeah. See, I'm so old. I would say sports movie, the one I like the most is, I was going back through my head, I suppose Hoosiers, the Gene Hackman movie about the Indiana State basketball champion in the 50s. So that's always resonated with me. I think because obviously the underdog story, I like writing those types of stories anyway, kind of the team that comes out of nowhere and shocks the world type of thing. So I would say that one is the one that, even after all these years, if I still see it on show it on some station or something, I'll flip on it just to watch some of it, and enjoy that. So yeah.
Oh, cool. Got two more for you. Is there anybody in your phone that you can call or text and we would think it's an interesting name, and they would get back to you? And it doesn't have to be sports again, and it could be from back in the day, or it could be a local coach or anything.
Wow. That's a tough one. Off the top of my head, I certainly have, my contact list is long, whether or not people will always respond, depending on what they're doing, but, or what they want from me. Because sometimes when the journalist is calling, there's always this red flag. What does he want? And why is
So
he
let me ask
checking
you,
in? But
are you the guy people go to from outside the area when they want to know about something? Prince William related. So do you get calls from maybe somebody?
Anymore.
It's his internet connection.
Oh, can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
That's okay. We can hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, these days, as you were mentioning earlier, Rusty, with social media and stuff, a lot of people can get their information elsewhere. So I think more what I try to emphasize because of my institutional knowledge now and being here so long is more the historical perspective on stuff. So I think that's where because a lot of the schools, there's such a transient area. You don't see a lot of, some programs are good about keeping records, many are not, and coaches are moving in and out, and it's just hard to really keep track of stuff. So I've kind of tried to do that on my own and keep track of things. So I think from that standpoint is when you're going to get I'm going to hear more from people about, hey, when did this last happen, or how many times has this happened, that type of stuff, because people don't have that information accessible for a variety of reasons. And so it's more along those lines. It's not necessarily current stuff, because that's more accessible through Twitter and Facebook and all these other platforms. It's more from the historical part. Hey, when did this last happen? Who's done this? Who's done that? And I think that's more where the need is. So if I'm going to hear from people, it's usually those types of perspectives that they're reaching out for.
Okay, cool. Kirk, you got anything else?
No. So yeah, for everybody going down there from Freedom, Madison's been there last year, but for Freedom, the parking around ODU Stadium, Ballard Stadium is mixed. It's kind of like a Florida State. They don't have a big parking there. Virginia Tech has a great parking situation. UVA is spread out. So all along Hampton Boulevard, there's places to park. Just want to let people know that. And the other thing I was going to say is that, we wish both teams well. Freedom's having a special season. If they win, which I think they will go down as one of probably the best 10 teams ever. And Madison's got a great chance to have a prolific upset. I would just wrap up with this. They faced two teams the second time, and their victories, Centerville they beat, and they beat them. They lost to Centerville, and they beat Centerville. They beat them pretty handily. And then Yorktown also. So they've been more impressive. They're on an 11-game winning streak. And then, Freedom just has the swagger, special team. And we've talked about all kinds of mythical 14 playoff, Highland Springs, Phoebus, Dinwiddie, as well as Freedom-Woodbridge. But, maybe they'll put something together. But, just support Inside Nova and support us. And by the way, if you want to hear something, tell us. Our viewers are starting to say, hey, you're biased or you don't talk about, tell us, tell us your opinion. Try to, we don't want anything bad. We don't want foul language or anything, but it's okay. We'll take it. And if you've got somebody that wants to be on here, absolutely we'll take it. And just, David, we look forward to having you back. Definitely, possibly to talk about basketball, but
we'll get you back on here to talk about some basketball. One thing I did want to also excuse me, is promote for you, Dave. You guys, does Inside Nova still do the hoops at the end of the year where there's a fundraiser?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's been my baby. So the answer is no. We did the last one in March. That was the 25th year. and I just retired. It was
Okay.
just, I decided not to do it anymore because it wasn't. So it was one of those deals. If somebody else was interested in picking it up, I'd more than happy to pass, because I don't have a copyright for it. If they want to do it, that's up to them. But as far as my involvement doing it with Inside Nova, yeah, no, it is retired.
Okay. All right.
But thank
cool.
you for asking.
Yeah. If there's anything you have going on, Dave, please feel free to come on here, and we'll mix up some sports, but we'll promote whatever it is. And again, I just want to say I appreciate everything you do for the county, for these athletes, for these coaches, and for these fans. You know, your name is something like, you know, my wife who follows sports, but it's like we just say Dave Fawcett. She's like, oh yeah, he did that article. Like, even if we don't see or recognize your face, although it's always down in that box, like I know that name.
Sure.
You know, that's like growing up for us. We were we grew up on the Daily Press, you know, and so David Teal and some of the folks down there we're very familiar with, just the name,
right.
You know. And Larry Rubamba does a great job
Right.
at Virginia Pilot, an outstanding job, and he's been
Good
on our
guy.
show. So we've been blessed to have, you know, some of the goals of relations, but we just want to say that we appreciate you. So will you be going down to Norfolk?
Yep. Keep going.
On Saturday?
I will be down there. Yes, we'll be down there
Okay.
Saturday. Yeah, so looking forward to it. I think Freedom. I'd be shocked if they lost that game. I mean, I would be. No, you didn't. I'd be shocked. I think they're on a mission. Nothing against Madison, but I think they want to finish this out, and they've been on a mission all season, and they are. You know, it should be a good one, but it should. I'm
I
expecting
agree.
Freedom to win. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, David. I will say this: your favorite movie of all time, Hoosiers. If Madison beats Freedom, in about 20, 30 years, they might make that movie about Madison if they beat Freedom, because it would be an incredible story. All right.
Yes.
And Dave, that would be
At this
something,
point,
right? You might want to write the screenplay for that, bro.
I'll file that one down.
Right. So, hey, look, thanks, man. I'll be there on Saturday as well. And so, again, I appreciate you. Everyone out there, support Inside Nova. And the way you can support us is just subscribe. A lot of you guys watching don't know. Look, if you're like my mom in her 70s, she's like, what do you mean? I watch it. I'm like, no, just hit the little button, Mom. So just subscribe. It helps us to look like we might be a little legit. And thanks again, Dave. And for my co-host, Kirk Hilliard, this has been the Kirk and Byrd Show. We are.
Thanks.